Hi, I'm John Brigham with Ikelite Underwater Systems, and the first thing we're going to take a look at is the next step in the evolution of the DS-160-161. This is a prototype, so it doesn't even have a name yet, but it's about 35% more capacitance. We've changed the shroud so that the beam angle is a conical. It's more of a fall off, it's softer, it's wider. You'll see that the reflector on the inside is chrome plated. This is going to increase your light output. In order for us to get that 45 to 4800 Kelvin temperature, we've tinted the flash tube. And it, of course, will still operate with the same TTL that we've built for years, as well as any existing battery packs that we have had prior for the 160 or 161, or even going back to the DS-125. This is the RX-100 6 and 7 housing, so it comes standard with a 4-inch port. There's a few options to correct for this, so we can actually add a WD-4, which will go straight over the port. That'll correct for light refraction and increase your field of view. You can take the port completely off and replace it with a dome port, which is excellent for over-unders and will also correct for the light refraction and increase the field of view. Both the RX-100 6 and the 7 will fit into this housing. Depth rated 200 feet, extremely lightweight and fully functional. So here we have probably the best price to performance ratio when it comes to underwater photography today. This is the Canon Rebel Sl system. What you're going to see here is that the camera housing, dome port, and lens is going to come in at just under $2,000, which is unheard of in underwater photography today. The results are spectacular. They can stack up against any DSLR and go unnoticed. So for a fraction of the price, you can really get involved in underwater photography and capture the shots that you're used to seeing in the magazines. The ports are interchangeable, so you can swap over to the 60mm macro for a flat port. You can put an extension on and even shoot 100mm for super macro. We even have a full 8-inch dome, so if you want to shoot the Tokina 10-17, you can shoot over-unders with it as well. It has an integrated TTL circuit, so if you use any of our DS strobes, the camera will communicate with those strobes for automatic flash exposure, and the camera can still shoot in full manual mode. This is the Olympus TG6. Now this camera has gotten a lot of press lately, and for good reason. It's an excellent camera. It shoots phenomenal macro. A little known accessory is actually the Olympus FCON TO2. Olympus makes this lens, and it's a circular fisheye lens. If we were to compare that to SLRs, that would be that 8mm circular image all the way up to a 30mm macro equivalent. What's really cool about it is that you can take this lens, put it directly on the camera, and then get a dome port for your housing, and then that lens can fit into the dome port. You can shoot over-unders, you can shoot wide angle. If you compare that to other options that can do something similar, you'd be looking at an external wide angle lens. So you can see generally the size difference, and there's also a huge cost difference. One last advantage of switching over to something like this would be that I can now use this lens topside, whereas this one I can't without the housing. I could also go snorkeling with this lens and the camera only. Furthermore, we've developed an RC converter so that if you use any of our DS strobes, you'll be able to have the camera communicate with the strobes converter for automatic flash exposure. So now, as opposed to shooting STTL or manual strobe exposure, you can get those fractional powers well below what you would be able to choose otherwise. All right, so this is a representation of what you'd find in a Canon 5D Mark IV, Nikon D850, any DSLR or full-frame mirrorless like the Sony A7R4, the new Sony A9 II, Nikon Z6, Z7, EOS R. So this is the dry lock port system. This is actually a miniature dome. This is the same 8-inch dome that you're used to seeing, but it's cut down to a smaller profile. So we still get the 8 inches in diameter, but we get a much more compact and maneuverable system underwater. What you'll notice is that if you use something like the 8-15 from Canon or Nikon, you won't see any distortion difference, you won't see any clarity, but you'll have a much smaller form factor to work with. This helps buoyancy quite a bit. Furthermore, you can swap this out, switch over to a macro lens. You can get a flat glass port with a 67mm thread, so that if you want to add external diopters, you can. You can switch out to a full frame, big 8-inch dome. You can deck the housing out with 45-degree viewfinders. You can add extensions and handles. It's a very modular, very professional grade system at a fraction of the weight. It's extremely lightweight, extremely easy to travel with, and the buoyancy is excellent underwater. All right, so here we can see a pretty decked out DSLR style housing. This is the full 8-inch dome. You'll see the tripod system on the bottom. You're able to pull a vacuum on this housing. Has M16 ports on the top for accessories, an integrated electronic bulkhead. You can add a GoPro to the top. Going back to the buoyancy, as opposed to adding buoyancy arms, you can actually add weight, a dive weight, when you get to your location. This is really great because you don't have to buy the expensive buoyancy arms. The weight will be there when you get there, and that's weight you don't have to travel with. So you've saved on cost and travel weight.